Thank you for the privilege of the invitation to share this platform with people I admire and respect. I salute also the bravery, some may say foolhardiness, of the organizers in inviting onto this platform an individual like me who has been decried by an organization styling itself the Higher Education Transformation Network as someone who's known to fraternize, booze and bri with such notorious lowlifes as Jeremy Gauntlet and Paul Hoffman. Without wanting the facts to interfere with a good story, I must record that although the invitations to such occasions of revelry regrettably never reached my chambers, I trust they were enjoyable even in my absence. But I raise the name of that organization for future reference, for if it were to live up to its name, it could make a contribution to the subject matter of this debate. I commence by stating the obvious, that the topic of this discussion embraces a myriad issues I cannot possibly cover in the 10 minutes allocated to me at the commencement of these proceedings. I shall simply raise some themes which we can discuss in greater detail later on. When I address transformation this evening, I do so from a perspective which accepts that the constitutional project embarked upon since 1994 is aimed not at the replacement of the privilege and advantage previously vested in one race group and one gender, with an equivalent privilege to be vested in an alternative race group or gender, but rather at a genuine transformation from a society founded on race and gender discrimination, suppression of human rights, and an authoritarian system of government, to one premised upon human dignity, equality, the advancement of human rights and freedoms, constitutionalism and the rule of law, with all that that encompasses, including an independent judiciary and an independent legal profession to serve that judiciary. Those objectives are noble, but were never going to be easy to achieve. 342 years of race and gender discrimination in the spheres of education and professional advancement saw the legal profession and the judiciary dominated overwhelmingly by white males, an untenable situation in a society which styled itself non-racial and non-sexist. But it also saw the legal profession and judiciary dominated by conservative elements that had learnt, even if not always comfortably, to live alongside racism and sexism, authoritarianism and suppression. How was that to change? I record that I approached the issue of transformation of our legal system unashamedly from the point of view that our judiciary should be drawn overwhelmingly, if not exclusively, from the ranks of those who practice in our courts. I know that this approach is in itself a topic of not insignificant debate, but I'm convinced that our courts are best presided over by those who have honed their skills in those courts, who've learnt over the years to assess evidence, to dissect and analyze arguments, and to appreciate what the rules and laws of procedure require of a smooth functioning court. If necessary, I can in due course expand on why I hold that belief. To achieve a genuine transformation of the judiciary would of necessity require a transformation of the legal profession. Advocacy in our courts requires language skills, oral skills, research skills, analytical skills. Those who wish to enter into the legal profession without having received schooling and a tertiary education in which these skills are developed do so at a distinct disadvantage. It is a tribute to those of my black colleagues who established themselves as leading practitioners during the previous dispensation that they did so despite the manifest disadvantages that a designedly inferior education system visited upon them. Those who manage to access and thereafter wish to survive in the legal professions require opportunity to display their talents and build their reputations. It is a tribute to both black and women practitioners who established notable track records for themselves under the previous dispensation that they managed to overcome the substantial prejudices and obstacles which the prevailing order under the old dispensation placed in their paths. But as the statistics of 1994 reveal, they were still in a very small minority. The impact of inferior education was not felt in the legal environment at all, and that is something we need to realize. It impacts upon our entire society, but it's the legal environment that's the subject of our focus tonight. What have we done since 1994 about the institutional inadequacies and discriminatory practices which held back disadvantaged people up to that time, resulting in a seriously skewed representation of race and gender in the legal profession? While some of the better schools previously restricted to white children have become non-racial, I'm not aware of any study that reveals that the general standard of education across the board has improved. In fact, influential players have recently suggested that the abominable Bantu education system offered more hope to young South Africans in its time than various education departments do currently. I see no evidence amongst those who arrive at and exit from tertiary institutions that basic principles of grammar have been inculcated at school. Trial advocacy is about persuasion. Inferior language skills remain a significant disadvantage. At tertiary level, some bright policymakers resolved that the premier law degree, which qualified its achievers for the legal professions, and which previously required 5 years of study, at a time when that degree was aimed predominantly at those who came from privileged schools, would now require only 4 years of study, including for many who came from less well-equipped and staffed schools. I do not know whether this was premised upon some bizarre notion that an inferior secondary education would equip you better to grasp principles of law in a shorter time. But whatever the reason, it hasn't worked. One of the casualties of a shortened course curriculum was language instruction. While some may view the erstwhile requirement of 3 language courses as excessive, there is now no language requirement. A lawyer without language skills is like a surgeon without a scalpel, ill-equipped for the task at hand. Language is the currency of litigation. It appears to me that we have regressed, instead of moving to empower the historically disadvantaged to access the professions, by which strategy we would have broadened the pool from which the judiciary will eventually be drawn. Possibly the Higher Education Transformation Network could make a contribution by focusing on the transformation of higher education rather than the perceived social habits of aging white advocates, so as better to equip those aspiring to enter the legal professions, amongst others. Thus far, South African society has failed in genuinely improving broad-based opportunities for aspiring lawyers to enter the professions and rise to the top. We have failed to provide the educational base required to provide the foundation of our new society, insofar as it may support a growing independent legal profession. In addition, there are other factors at play once individuals have, despite these challenges, managed to enter the professions. Briefing patterns are often and legitimately identified as obstacles. Well-established attorneys' firms, dominated by white male attorneys, often rely upon the old-school tie network, which militates against opportunities for black and female advocates and correspondent attorneys attempting to make their mark. There's nothing remarkable about this. It's not peculiar to South African society. People work more comfortably with those they know and understand. But the biggest single litigant in our courts is the state. There is nothing to prevent the government of the day from giving precise and detailed instructions to the officers of the state attorney to ensure an even and wide distribution of work amongst historically disadvantaged advocates and correspondent attorneys. My personal experience in the courts suggests that a proper analysis of state attorney briefing patterns would reveal significant degrees of crony briefing amongst the minority of black and women practitioners. And that perpetuates the broad-based discrimination against other historically disadvantaged lawyers. While the slow rate of transformation in private sector briefing patterns is a matter of significant concern, the right of litigants to choose their legal representatives is internationally and constitutionally recognized, and no government diktat can legitimately be imposed upon private practitioners to change their briefing pattern. That said, the organized professions could and certainly should do more to provide opportunities for historically disadvantaged practitioners. But where the client litigant is the state, there is no excuse for not creating more opportunities than are at present being provided. And the reality is, when lawyers with talent are exposed to others, even in circumstances where they are on opposing sides, and often in consequence of such circumstances, reputations are built and practices expand. Within the professions, on the other hand, there is legitimate criticism to be leveled at the failure to provide effective and structured programs better to accommodate the pressures of childbearing and motherhood on female practitioners, and the introduction of policies opposing sexual harassment and small-scale subsidies for or exemptions from professional dues based on maternity leave requirements simply do not begin to address the challenges which experience has taught us militate very strongly against professional progress by female practitioners. It is little wonder that although there's been a significant rate in the racial change in the racial profile of the professions of the judiciary, gender representation remains significantly skewed. Overall, until there are meaningful opportunities for progress and success in the litigating professions for historically disadvantaged practitioners, the pool from which the judiciary can properly be appointed will remain depressingly small. Peter Bruce, in an editorial in Business Day written shortly after my resignation from the Judicial Service Commission, remarked that the only way to get experience is to get it. Without opportunity, you can't get it. May I add one curveball to this debate? For as long as the approach of the Judicial Service Commission is interpreted or perceived to be weighted against the appointment of white male candidates to the judiciary, and in consequence, few experienced white male candidates make themselves available for judicial appointment, the legal professions will continue to be dominated by white male lawyers, as the formerly traditional efflux of experienced senior lawyers to the judiciary will not occur. As a result, while these practitioners remain in practice, the opportunities for younger and historically disadvantaged members of the professions to rise up and make an impact will be reduced. Which litigant with resources would not opt to be represented by the most experienced practitioners available? No one said it was going to be simple. I want, however, tonight to go beyond the demographic stereotype in the debate on transformation of the professions, transforming the transformation. Important as demographic normalization is, what I term mindset transformation is truly critical. There were many very clever and competent lawyers who kept the previous system in business. The transformation of our society contemplated in the constitutional project goes way beyond eliminating the racial and gender discrimination of our past. It envisages an entirely different kind of society, democratic, accountable, transparent, embodying the rule of law, built on a separation of powers and reliant upon an independent judiciary to protect citizen and organ of state alike. What have we done about that to transform our society? In the educational environment, we offer a school course entitled Life Orientation, but without demeaning this endeavor to the extent of suggesting that it teaches little more than not to eat your peas with your knife, I pose the serious question, what is it doing about appreciation of constitutional value? There is scope for a seriously in-depth construct of a curriculum course that will ensure that our citizens who leave school appreciate both their obligations and their entitlements in terms of the Constitution, and are able to enter our profession with that understanding. And I would suggest that that too ought to be the sort of thing that the Legal Practice Bill ought to be looking at in terms of the professions, rather than means for the government to control. I'm under pressure. Can I just say this about the Judicial Service Commission? How must that commission ensure that candidates for appointment to the judiciary are both appropriately qualified and fit and proper? I'd like to make this point. While the entire interview process in the commission could do with significant revision, during the 3.5 years that I served on it, there was depressingly little focus in the interview process of the JSC on candidates' understanding and appreciation of the values of the Constitution. My own focus was always on their understanding of the rule of law, and I might say that very few individuals were able even to articulate a view of the rule of law, but many of those were appointed. The concern is this: unless we ensure that those we appoint to the bench have an appreciation of the values and the underpinning structures of our Constitution, we may change the appearance of our judiciary without changing the nature, the structure, the application of that judiciary's approach to life. I want to offer one example, a quotation from a post-constitutional judgment of the High Court in a matter dealing with the status and constitutionality of courts administering African customary law. The judgment, delivered by a former colleague of mine who was a highly competent courtroom lawyer and who would meet the requirements of those who understand the needs of transformation only in demographic terms. That judgment contains the following passage, and I quote, "There seems in my view to be no reason whatsoever for the imposition of the Western conception of the notions of judicial impartiality and independence in the African customary law setting. The Western conception of the notions of judicial impartiality and independence." I say to you that that is a most disturbing understanding of our Constitution, by someone who would meet the new constitutional demographic requirements. And I say to you, that is why we need to focus on constitutionalism and an understanding and being steeped in the new values of our Constitution. If our judiciary is to be transformed in a manner that will assist in transforming our society. I say the message has to be important as it is for our society to see that the judiciary is open to all, irrespective of race and gender. It is essential that our society can legitimately believe that our judiciary understands and embraces the values of the Constitution, and that it is equipped to give effect, along with the legislature and the executive, to the values and principles on which the elected constitution makers sought to found our new society. Once that is achieved, we will have a transformed judiciary. Thank you.